Hello, and welcome to Our Special Lives. Today we're tackling a topic which can be overwhelming and even scary for parents with special needs, and that is estate planning. What is estate planning? Generally, it means putting in place legal documents that dictate what happens to your stuff and your special needs child if you become disabled or pass away. This is a topic that many families make the mistake of avoiding because thinking about dying is pretty dreary. Many people mistakenly think the process doesn't apply to them if they aren't wealthy, and many people think the documents are complicated and expensive. It can be very scary and even terrifying to think of the possibility that someone else may need to care for our child at some point. Regardless of these fears, it may help to reframe this topic in your mind as doing something loving and helpful to support your child with special needs, just like all the other things that you do. If you don't have these documents in place, today you need to gather the information about these issues and try to put a plan in place to take steps to get these documents in order. As you'll hear today, some pretty bad things can happen if you ignore this issue. For that reason, this is one video that you don't want to miss. To help us navigate this topic today, I have an incredible guest joining us. Paula Peaden, an award-winning attorney who helps special needs families put these documents in place, is joining us. Paula has been practicing in this area of law for over 30 years. I'm linking to her information below. Paula is going to answer our questions and provide some guidance and resources on these topics. And before we begin, if you like these videos, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Hi, Paula. We are so excited to speak with you about these estate planning issues today. This topic can be so overwhelming for families, and I'm so happy you're here and spending time with us and helping us navigate some of these issues.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you, and I hope I can be of help.
Yes, great. Thank you. Okay, so the first question is, let's talk about what I think is the most important thing for people to understand, which is, can you give us some insight into some of the bad things that can happen if you ignore this issue of estate planning?
Absolutely, and frankly, in ignoring estate planning, that really hits all ages, but certainly particularly parents with young children and special needs children. There's a heightened concern. It's very important for everyone to think about if any of us could have a car accident, any of us could get sick, and you want to not leave your children in a lot of turmoil. While there will be emotional turmoil, you certainly don't want to throw them into the courts and hit them with a lot of legal expenses because you didn't do good planning. Similarly, as if you're 25 and you have a baby, you want to go get life insurance, right? You don't want to leave it, well, I'll probably live to 90, I'm not worried about it. You go get life insurance. And in the same manner, people need to think about wills and trusts, powers of attorney, medical directives. With special needs children and guardianship for all minor children, but I often work sometimes with elderly people who have been guardian for their adult disabled child, and they understand that they need to pass that job on in an orderly way, in a planning manner, not in a crisis manner. So special needs trusts are the thing that is unique to parents or grandparents that have a potential for a special needs beneficiary. And when you don't have those good documents in place, everything can get fixed. That's what I spend most of my time doing. If all of the clients did all the planning we recommend and everything was in order, I would not be as busy. So it's just a nice gift to give your family. And having worked with people who have lost parents or been the beneficiary of good planning documents, they recognize that.
That's great. So can you give us a little detail if you've got a child with special needs, and let's say you pass away, and that child, when the will goes or when their estate goes into probate, is left, maybe let's say $10,000 or $20,000. What happens to that money, or what are some of the negative effects that can happen?
Sure. If they're a minor, a lot of people, I've actually been doing this now for 30 years, so I have seen a lot of things happen that probably statistically don't happen a lot, but they happen, and that's why lawyers get involved. If you leave money to a child who's disabled or not disabled, who's underage, the life insurance company is not going to give them their check. So what happens is it gets paid into court, and somebody has to pay an insurance company thousands of dollars a year to manage the money for the minor child. With a special needs child, if they are on Medicaid or SSI, certainly that will remove their benefits until a court proceeding occurs and the judge orders the funds put into something called a special needs trust. But very importantly, I'm going to talk about two main kinds of special needs trust. One is what we call a third-party special needs trust. I have a disabled child. I do really good planning. I have a $500,000 life insurance policy, and at my death, my life insurance policy goes directly to that trust. My child can maintain their Medicaid and SSI, and that special needs trust could be used for their supplemental needs, things the government won't pay for. And at that child's death, that money can go on to my other children or charity or whoever I want. Where planning isn't done and somebody has that $500,000 policy and they leave it directly to that child or to their estate, which passes to that child, then that money has to go through an expensive court proceeding and be put into what we call a first-party special needs trust. And the difference between a first-party special needs trust is that it has to have a payback to the government, which means that if that special needs child doesn't use all that money, the government gets paid back money to reimburse the government for the money they've spent through the Medicaid program.
So basically, instead of a family member receiving it, essentially the government gets a lien on that money because the correct trust wasn't put in place.
Correct. And we do have what we call ABLE accounts now that a lot of people ask about, which are a good tool, but they're not, in my opinion, they're not to take the place of a special needs trust, because ABLE accounts are for small amounts of money that are going to be spent, because ABLE accounts work like first-party special needs trust. They have a payback provision. So if you had a child who had special needs and you can put $15,000 a year in it, so say that money grew to be 45 and then your child dies in a car accident, that money goes back to reimburse Medicaid. Whereas if you had set up the third-party special needs trust, there would be no payback provision. And I find that happens a lot with grandparents. That's why whenever I do estate planning, even for grandparents, I say, do you have a special needs grandchild? Because a lot of people will say in their wills, my third of my estate goes to my daughter, but if she predeceases me, then it goes to her 3 children, and one of them may have special needs. So when I do my planning, I do what I call a standalone third-party special needs trust so that other people in the family can use it. So if husband and wife have a special needs child, they could also tell their aunt or their parent, hey, you could put money in this special needs trust too, and not have the risk of the payback.
So that's another important reason for putting this special needs trust in place, so that not only does your stuff that would have gone to your special needs child end up in the right place, avoiding the expenses of an expensive court proceeding and avoiding the lien that then Medicaid or the government has on that money, but also it provides a vehicle for other family members to designate as inheritance or other monies can go into that trust and not cause a breakdown of government benefits for that child.
Absolutely. And the guardianship aspect, I just want to mention that really quick because people get confused about it. When your child is under 18, every parent is the natural guardian of their child, regardless of their child's health situation. When the child is 18, every parent loses that natural guardianship status, regardless of the child's health status. So a lot of people just don't understand that. Well, my child has Down syndrome, they're very disabled, and why do I lose my guardianship? That's just the law. And so the planning documents I talked about control the money, but in terms of the physical raising the child, if you do have a disabled child, you still have to, when they turn 18, sometimes go to court and become their legal guardian.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question. Let's say I'm the parent of a special needs child, to use your example, who has Down syndrome, and I'm not super wealthy. I'm a pretty, average Joe, middle class family. Um, so you've talked about the special needs trust needs to be put in place, and then also the guardianship documents. What are the essential documents that you would recommend for that family, keeping in mind that cost and complication is an issue?
Correct. So it's, the old saying, penny wise, dollar foolish. This is one of those areas. It's just like my example. If I'm 25, what do I want to spend $700 a year for life insurance? Because if you don't and you die, there's going to be a catastrophe for your children. I think that the cost of estate plans with special needs trusts, I think realistically, obviously some people have more complicated situations, but I think it's a pretty good estimate, $1,000 to $2,500 to take care of these legal documents, which, might be in place the rest of your life. So I understand that it's not really expensive when you think of the value and what you spend on other things, because if you don't do these things and something happens, it's a $5,000 retainer just to go into court. I mean, and so you have to kind of care enough about your family that this is an expense. This is an expense that, whether you have, and a lot of people have life insurance, like they might not have a lot in savings, but they each have $500,000 in life insurance. And again, I think like the way that I try to do my work, unless something dramatically changes, like I give clients a range of review these every 8 to 10 years. So, I don't think they're expensive for the value, and in comparing them to other things, I think that not having these things done can be so not only financially catastrophic, but emotionally. So I would encourage clients, I think with special needs planning, I do think that, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and obviously there's a value to experience. And in that regard, in selecting an attorney, I would look to the Special Needs Alliance, and I would, most attorneys will talk to you on the phone and get a better feel for your situation. And, sometimes people call and they have like three companies, some people have much more complicated finances, and that certainly affects the fee. But I think you could interview attorneys and get kind of a range on their fee, but don't just be guided by that, because I don't believe the most expensive attorney is the best attorney. I would never say that. I don't see that. But you do want someone who has experience. And usually if people have been doing things for a long time, they usually know what they're doing, or they don't keep doing it. I'm part of a Special Needs Alliance, and that's all over the country. And that is an organization, and I'm not just saying it because I'm in it, because I always tell people I'm plenty busy, and I just want to give people ethically good information. Within the Special Needs Alliance, there's a lot of vetting to get in that organization. There's a lot of advertisements and groups, and if you pay a fee, you're listed as whatever. But the Special Needs Alliance is an organization that not everyone can join. You have to apply, you have to have references, you have to have been practicing for a certain amount of years. So that's a good group, and it's throughout the country. And if you Google Special Needs Alliance, I find the attorneys in that group to all know what they're doing. Now, certainly people have different fee structures, and as a consumer, assuming you find an attorney that you do see is very qualified, then there's nothing wrong with getting a couple of opinions. So that's my advice.
Well, that's fantastic. I love the fact that anybody, no matter who's listening, can look up Special Needs Alliance, and I will link to that in the show notes from today. That's a fantastic resource. I actually had never heard of that, so I'm happy to know about that as well.
We have like 2 conferences usually. This one got skipped this spring, but where we meet with the people from Social Security, and all kind of the experts are there, and we have handbooks we can give out to people. And I think there's a lot of consumer resources on the site. So you don't, I do caution people it's a really important area, and it has to be done right. And just listening to what your friend said or the bank teller said, to me, there's a value in paying attorneys that are skilled in things, so you have the right advice going forward. We certainly get our share of. Well, I didn't know, and I listened to so and so. So, but if you're not looking for specific legal questions, there's a lot of good resources that are on the website. But people, no matter how bright they are, because I had a conversation with someone last week who's a physician, and he had read a few things on the internet and he misinterpreted it. And sometimes articles are written to make things sound exciting for people to read articles. So I do encourage people with this area of law. You can always get forms done, but that old saying, "It's worth the paper it's written on," is true in legal documents.
Yeah, that was my next question, because I know that, there's a lot of legal documents floating around on the internet, and, I've had friends who have, kind of gotten the form off the internet for like a real estate transaction, let's say. What's your thought about that approach for this particular topic?
Well,
I already know the answer.
Gainfully employed, I guarantee there's a reason lawyers don't put a stop to people using those documents. I can't tell you how many times I've had to go to court because one word is wrong in a trust, and we have to go to a court for aid and guidance. There's thousands of dollars in legal fees. Everyone can lead their life how they choose. I will tell you that lawyers make a lot more money from problem cases. When I've done a thorough estate plan and people pass away, I maybe need to explain things to the trustee for less than an hour, and usually I'm done with an instruction letter. When people come in because things weren't done right or somebody, and frankly, I've seen attorneys write that don't do wills, write documents that we had to go to court over. So, but everyone gets to make their own decisions in life. I don't live my life that way, even for non-legal areas. But it's a free country, and I don't encourage it. And I will tell you that attorneys make more income off of the people that do their own legal work than the people that do their work correctly. That's my experience.
Gotcha. You had mentioned life insurance, and that may not be something, it's a little outside of the scope of what we're talking about today, but does the Special Needs Alliance have any resources for life insurance?
Well, that's a good, you know what, I don't know. I do like to only stay in my area. So when people have questions about financial planning, I refer them, and there are people who specialize in life insurance. Life insurance, is one of those areas that I don't know that there's a right or wrong. I mean, there's some people feel like they need millions of dollars of life insurance. Other people, I know that, like, when my husband and I were younger with our kids, we kind of both sat down and said, look, if something happens to you, I would need this much money. I would probably need more, if you have a stay-at-home mom or dad, you need a nanny. Like, I just encourage people to think through their expenses. There's a lot of good level term policies out there. So when we were younger, we got a lot of insurance for a little bit of money that would terminate at when we hit 70, because our kids would be raised. But financial planners are probably better at that. But in the end, one of my very first legal cases, I'll never forget him. I met with this man and woman who at the time seemed ancient to me, but they were probably just in their mid-50s. And the man was kind of being a little, like, I don't know, braggy is the right word, but he was like, wow, I just got $1 million life insurance policy and it's costing whatever. And I thought in my mind, I didn't say anything. I thought, oh, that's a lot of money. I think he's wasting his money on the life insurance. Well, lo and behold, a year and a half later, he gets diagnosed with leukemia. So I learned my lesson. Life insurance is something you pay for it because you might need it. And if you didn't need it, be glad. But probably most financial planners, I mean, every now and then I come into someone who, in my opinion, was sold way too much life insurance. They don't have a lot of money and they're spending all this money on life insurance. So just like lawyers, go to good, reputable financial planners and life insurance, and then look at your own views, what you think you would want to have.
Gotcha. That's helpful. We did term policies, and honestly, it helps me sleep better at night, just knowing that we have,
absolutely,
that to fall back on, if something bad were to happen.
Because you can get more insurance for your money, and so when you have young children or people that are dependent on you, that's maybe more important to have more insurance versus a whole life investment vehicle. But again, that's something you should one-on-one counsel with a financial person.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you. Okay, so my next question is,
and let me bring, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
But this goes back to my trust, because you're reminding me of a case I had a couple of years ago. The reason I like trust instead of wills is you don't have the probate system. So when someone has a trust and has life insurance designated to it, people can get access to that money much more quickly. So I had one year a college student whose father was killed, and he paid her cell phone bills, he paid her rent, and there was a mess of probate because he didn't think he was going to die in a car accident at his age, and he did, and it created quite a disruption for her. Fortunately, a distant family member stepped in and loaned her money, but with a trust, whoever you put as your trustee can get the money and take care of things right away, and your children aren't left in a quagmire.
So it's bringing up another issue for me. In the example you brought up earlier, where someone has a special needs child and for whatever reason they haven't put these documents in place, and then you were saying you need to go through this court proceeding to kind of fix everything. How long does that process take? And is the special needs child then disqualified from the government benefits in the meantime? How does that work?
They're not disqualified, but it takes, probably if you have to go through the probate system, it could take 5 weeks, 7 weeks to get access to money. But they would stay on their benefits so that's not the issue. Eventually they'd be cut off, but they don't cut them off right away. It's just that you're putting a burden on people because you didn't take care of things well. And I like trust even without special needs trust. Even if there's not a special needs child, I hardly ever write wills anymore. And it's not much more money to do a trust, and it takes away probate tax, time delays, and they just work great. So with parents who have a special needs child, say you have 3 children and one has special needs, I will do something called a joint trust. And the trust will say, when one of us dies, if our child is under 30, for example, their third is held until 30, with a trustee being allowed to access the money sooner, obviously, or give it to them sooner, obviously. The special needs child's money goes into what I call a standalone third-party special needs trust, and that trust will be in place until that child's dead.
Okay, gotcha. And just to put this in perspective, so you were saying that in order to put basic documents in place, we're talking about maybe $1,000 to $2,500.
Yeah, if you're doing a special needs trust, you're going to be more around with the power of attorney, medical directive, joint trust, special needs trust, putting the house in the trust. It's going to be more around $2,000 for something like that.
Okay, so let's say
that's a ballpark. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple $1,000s. What is the cost if these documents are not done and you have to go through that, other process where you have to kind of put the Band-Aids on?
It depends on the complexity and the size of the state, but I would say $10,000 at least. Probably more than that.
So 5 times more if you don't put the documents in place. Yeah, I was just trying to.
These are ranges because I just tell what most people pay.
Yeah, I just wanted to put it in context for people who are saying, wow, a couple $1,000s sounds like a lot, but if they're not put in place, it can be like 5 times that much to try to undo it.
Absolutely.
Not to mention the hassle and all of that.
Absolutely.
So my next question is, when you go through the process of doing these documents, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, things that people need to think about. So can you kind of go over the big ones for people?
So when I do, which I do a lot of, my will, trust, special needs trust, power of attorney, you need to think about, a lot of people pick their spouse, but not everybody, and that's fine. If your spouse can't make decisions for you, who is your backup for financial? So that would be your person who'd be your backup executor, your backup trustee, your backup power of attorney, and that's the person who handles your money. But the other issue is, until your children are 18, who should raise them? Who should be their guardian? That's not a financial role. That's who's going to write the permission slip for school kind of thing. And the last thing is who's going to make your medical decisions for you. If you're in a coma or you're in ICU for 3 weeks, who gets to be your advocate with the physician? it's my preference that whoever you pick to raise your child should probably also be the trustee, with exception. Everything here has exceptions. I had a case where a fellow that died young had put his father to be the trustee because his father was really good with money. He really was. But he put his sister as the person to raise the child. And that just created so many fights because the sister was like, oh, I want her to go to ballet and do all these things. And the older father thought, well, that's not a good use of money. So to me, if you trust someone enough to raise your child, you should probably trust them to make good financial decisions. There are exceptions to that. But the role you have to think about is who's going to handle your money if you become incapacitated and at your death, and accordingly, who's going to handle your trust fund for your children, and then who would make medical decisions for you if you were alive but unable to speak for yourself.
So most people would generally choose their spouse. Mm-hmm. And then if they didn't want to choose their spouse, and again, I'm just talking broadly, they would have to decide, usually probably a family member who would take care of their children. And
usually it is a family member, not always, but usually people have a brother or sister or somebody. And that's another value, hopefully, to an attorney, because we've seen so many things go well and not go well. I usually give my opinion. I ask about, well, what do they like? Where do they live? So that's a good, I always think of attorneys that are called counselors at law. I think that's part of our job, to counsel the client based on our experience of watching other people go through these, to have a conversation. So it's not always family, but most people, that's where we end up.
Okay. And then, in terms of other kinds of decisions that people need to think about, do you have to think about, kind of long-term planning for your special needs child, or kind of where you want them to end up for the long term?
Yes, that has to do with, I'm not a big proponent of putting a lot of things in writing about that. Same thing with my medical directives. People want to write all these things about what they would and wouldn't want. The most important thing is to pick someone you trust. So you don't have a crystal ball. So you might think today in 2020, if I died, I want them to go live here. That might not be the right thing in 2040. So you can, I think the focus is who becomes your decision maker if you're not able to make those decisions for your child. As my clients, I do have a conversation with my clients as the children get older about whether they want to go to group homes or not. That's a family decision. I really push my older clients more to make that transition because I have watched over the years children who have been with their parent forever, and now the parent's 85 and a crisis occurs. So I do go over that. That's very fact and family specific. Some people are fortunate and they'll have an adult sibling. I always tell my clients, and they always laugh, they'll have an 8 and a 5-year-old. And I'm like, well, someday your 5-year-old might be taking care of your 8-year-old disabled child. And they laugh at me, but I've seen that happen. I've seen many times, especially if a sibling has raised their own family, that they'll take in their disabled brother or sister and are quite loving, even though maybe when they were younger, they fought all the time. So that's why I don't think you can be but so specific. Just put good people in place and pull these out every 8 to 10 years, sooner if something changes, but have a conversation with an state elder or special needs planner about, is this still a good plan?
Okay, that sounds great. Now, you talked earlier about guardianship documents, and you talked about how, even though your child can be severely disabled, and it's fairly obvious that you need to remain their guardian, you still have to have this piece of paper in place. So can you talk a little bit about that, and also what might happen if you don't have it in place, and what would happen then?
Well, I've seen this more in the last 10 years. Years ago, not as many people felt the need to get guardianship over their adult disabled child. But now with the schools requiring it more, and maybe doctors being more legalistic, when your child's 18 and you become their guardian, that takes away their rights, and it gives you the right to make decisions for them. So not every disabled child needs that. Some disabled children can still drive, can still vote. I do sometimes craft guardianships. It's not one size fits all for that. But for someone who has a child who is not able to communicate and needs the guardianship, we usually file our guardianship petitions 6 months prior to their 18th birthday. Um, the fees for that, because we do have to do a whole court proceeding, are usually like $2,000 to $3,000. People, that's a problem for people, and I understand that. And I just explained to them the guardianship again is forever until it has to be changed. But you're asking the state to take away a person's rights, and even though you may be, and everybody in the world would sign that you're the best person in the world, the court has to have one rule for everybody. They can't make subjective decisions. Well, these parents have been really good. Let's not make them do the guardianship. So it is a whole legal proceeding we have to go through, because a judge is making a huge decision, and they require a lot of things to make that decision. And the disabled child has the right to object. I mean, there was a famous case on that where they're like, I don't want my parent to be the guardian. But I try to again, use my experience, I guess, to vet those things out ahead of time, so that most of the times, by the time I go to court, there's no surprises. But it is an actual court hearing. And if you don't have one, not everyone's going to have a problem. I mean, not everybody tells me the school, some people still continue to let a parent make decisions, but more and more I'm having people say they need the guardianship.
Got it. Okay, wonderful. So are there any other issues kind of in the legal arena that parents of special needs children should kind of be aware of? You talked about the ABLE accounts before, and I'm going to link to ABLE below.
Okay.
But generally speaking, that is an account that is, I know in Virginia it's tax deductible up to $2,000 a year. I think the tax deductibility varies by state.
Yes.
But and I
the 529 plan, but I would caution people again. I think that they let you put up to 500,000 in ABLEs, but I would not do that, because it's a payback vehicle that people. So if I had a rich relative or someone who wanted to give my child $15,000 a year, I'd have them give it to a third-party special needs trust, not an ABLE account. I think ABLE accounts are good if you're going to spend the money in the short term. I don't think they're as good saving vehicles as third-party special needs trusts because of the payback provision.
Okay, and just to be clear, that means that if something happens to the child and the money is not spent, that the government has a lien on those assets, and they can take the assets based on what the child has spent through Medicaid.
Correct.
Okay, yes. Got it.
So I look them for and a lot of people don't realize that when your child, if you pass away or retire, your child gets your disability benefit. So that's extra money that could be put in an ABLE account. And you could have a child who lives in a group home who wants a code or a TV, and they could use the ABLE account for those kinds of things. Food, the ABLE account can be used for food. So they have a really good use, but I think people should understand that before they dump too much money into it.
Gotcha. Are there any other kind of like vehicles or considerations that people should be thinking about in the legal arena that you think bear mention?
So many. It's hard to, like, marital issues between spouses, sometimes with a disabled child who's going to become the guardian. If someone's getting a child support check, that can be assigned to a special needs trust. So I think that the best advice I can give anyone is to really consult with someone, have a conversation with an attorney, and go over all their details, because I think the main things we've talked about, the estate plan and the guardianship, are the main things that everybody needs to know about. And then I get asked a lot about leaving my child my house to live in. But that's a whole, not a right or wrong is not the answer is the same for everybody. And that's another thing that you need to kind of sit down and think about things. But then I would bring them to someone who does this all the time and help work through your document.
Okay, great. And just sorry, just to go back to the guardianship for a minute. You talked about how sometimes, even if you don't have a guardianship in place, the doctors or a school will still allow the parent to make decisions for that child. Have you ever run into a situation where a parent kind of got stuck because did not have a guardianship in place and were trying to make medical decisions? Maybe the child was hospitalized or in
I
an
really
accident or
haven't,
something like that.
because clients who have children with mental illness, there's more of an urgency. So if you have a child who's going to be paranoid schizophrenics and all that, and do things that are against their best interest, then we want to always file our guardianship 6 months before. But for a lot of people, under Virginia law, we do have something called the substitute decision-making statute. And that means that if you can't make your own medical decisions, your relatives, in order of blood kinship, can make them for you. Why everyone doesn't rely on that is if you have a child who is disabled and they're able to talk, but their decisions aren't good, it puts the doctors much more comfortable if the parent has a guardianship order. Because sometimes I've had little cases where somebody didn't want surgery, and without the guardianship order, the medical staff wasn't really clear. Only a court order can adjudicate someone incapacitated. So there have been times where physicians had said, look, we need to do this surgical procedure, go to court. But so you could have, I personally haven't had, because I can kind of get emergency guardianships, I guess. So I'm not saying I haven't had them, but I have always been able, I haven't had something horrible happen, because once we know there's an emergency, we can get into court quicker, but you don't want to leave it for that. But again, a conversation with an attorney about, should I get guardianship? What are the pros and cons? I mean, there's times people talk to me and in the end they say, you know what, we're not going to file for guardianship right now. I don't want my child to not be able to drive. We've done the testing through the state. I don't want them emotionally to know that they've been declared incompetent. And then there's other reasons where there's no question we should get a guardianship.
Got it. So, Paula, if people who are listening are in Virginia and they want to get in touch with you, I'm going to link to your contact details below. But how can they reach you?
My phone number is should be on the website, or you'll link it. And my assistant normally calls people, and then we do set up a complimentary phone consult when for these matters. Not for everything, but for this matter. And then we have a phone consult and go over their specific situation and what I recommend and what my fixed charge would be for planning.
Okay, great. And then you talked about it's the Special Needs Alliance, and I'll link to that below. Are there any other resources that you would recommend?
Not well. So again, with everyone's individual situation being so varied, I really think that people should have a one-on-one with someone. I find it harder for me when people come with me, well, I have these 5 articles, could you read them? I'm like, I don't need to read them. Tell me your problem, I'll tell you what I recommend. So yeah. I think it's, a lot of people ask, where can I read about this or that? There's a lot of stuff on the internet you can read, but in the end, I think your situation is your situation, and it's worth you talking to an attorney to find out what you should do, because, the old saying, you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
Doing this for 10 plus years, they're going to be able to get to the point pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that because of attorney income. I'm truly not. I've seen some really sad situations where people got really bad advice. The bank tellers are the famous ones. And I've myself, when my own father died, sat in the bank with my mother, and I was like, that's not right. Don't tell her that. No offense on bank tellers, because I think it's just that attorneys have law licenses. They have malpractice. They spend a lot of time, and that's partly why there's a fee, right? It's expensive to run a law practice, to keep up with all the regulations, and Social Security and Medicaid is time consuming. So going to someone who knows it is really, really the best advice I can give.
Yeah, and I think one thing that people might not know is that a lot of the wording and phrases within these documents are extremely specific
Yes,
in order to make the document legally valid.
yes.
And so that's why trying to use a form off the internet is typically a disaster because it may not even be valid in your state.
Language is not precise. We have one word is wrong in a document, we've got to go have a whole court hearing. So
Exactly.
I've been surprised at some of the work. I could probably come up with documents that I could have a person who doesn't work in this area read and think it's fine, and then I could probably tell you why it's not, and it's going to court. So it's just something I wouldn't, as a parent, I wouldn't risk my family with a do-it-yourself on this.
Yeah, exactly. And, Paula, we used you for our estate
Mhm.
documents. I can vouch from our personal experience. We had an absolutely wonderful experience using you. And,
Oh, thank you.
if you're not a Virginia resident listening to this, I'm sure you can find someone great on Special
Yeah.
Needs Alliance. It sounds like.
If you go on the Special Needs Alliance and somebody wants to just shoot me a quick email, do you know this person? I don't know everybody, but I do know some of them, and that I could say, yeah, they're great. But I think like with lawyers and maybe with doctors, although I have a child coming out of medical school, but don't want me saying this, years of experience and focusing in an area, focusing like you don't want to go to your real estate attorney for this stuff unless they're very proficient and do a high volume. I think that you should use attorneys that focus on certain areas, whether your need is family law, bankruptcy, real estate, everyone. The more you do something, I think the better, the more experiences you have that you can bring to your counseling session and help the client make decisions.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's funny. I mean, I'm an attorney as well. And I think there is a public perception that if you are an attorney, you know everything about the law. And
Yes.
I always, if someone asks me a family law question, the analogy that I give is, going to a hand surgeon and asking him to perform heart
Yeah.
surgery. It's just a completely different ball of wax, and it's very, very true in the estate planning arena. Estate planning is one of those areas of law that is highly specific.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to a family law attorney who was thinking of doing, some kind of Q&A like this, and I said, "Ask me what the questions would be because I don't know. I know I'm an issue spot. I don't know, not know because I've been around it, but I think like a regular person on these issues. So yeah, laws a lot more specialized than people appreciate. And I am the first attorney to send people off to say, I don't. That's not my area. This is what I think. Not my area. Go to talk to this person." Yeah.
Well, Paula, I think we've given people a lot to think about today. I can't thank you enough for your
You're
time
very
here. I
welcome.
really
Nice seeing you
appreciate.
again.
Yes, and I really appreciate your offer. If somebody has a question about an attorney that they find
Yes.
on Special Needs Alliance, for you to maybe give a vector to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's
Absolutely.
all we had for today, and
Okay.
thank you again for all of your help. I think you're really going to give people a lot of guidance in this area.
I hope
So
so. I
thanks
hope
so
so. All
much.
right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Okay. All right. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to the video today. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And please leave me a comment or send me an email at ourspeciallives.com. I'd love to hear from you.